I shoved my hand into the glove box while Rafel's car idled outside the club and my fingers hit cool metal. A brass hotel key and a crumpled receipt bearing another woman's name. Suspicion sat in my throat and moved my hands faster. I held the key up. "What is this, Rafal?" I said. The glove box light painted his face the color of amber. He reached for the key with a calm that made my skin tighten. I had thought forgiveness could be a kind of shelter. That belief collapsed the moment the key slid into my palm. Doubt arrived first. My fingers tightened around the metal. The doubt braided itself into questions. I thought about the locket I wore against my sternum, the little gold circle that had become a talisman against nights like this. I thought about the way I had smoothed his coat at an event 2 weeks earlier and told myself I trusted him. Rafal cleared his throat. "Alina," he said. He did not sound angry. He sounded measured, which felt worse. "It's not what you think." I pulled the receipt free and read the name aloud, Amelia Torres. My voice did not wobble. My mouth steadied with a determination I did not expect. "Why is there a receipt with that name?" He leaned back, fingers steepling on the wheel. "Marco handles logistics. A name gets mixed up. A key was misplaced. Nothing for you to worry about, Alina." His hands were steady. His eyes were steady. His voice had that low, velvety shape that usually soothed me. Tonight it acted like a lock. I pushed the glove box shut with my knee and turned to him. "Marco," I asked, "are you telling me Marco used my locket's hiding place to slip another woman's hotel key?" The car windows fogged with the heat of our breaths. We were parked under the club's awning. Rain had left the asphalt dark and reflective. Rafal looked at the instrument cluster for a long moment. "Alina, don't do this here. We can talk inside." His jaw moved. He always steadied himself that way before he decided how much to tell. I stepped out of the car. My pulse felt like clumsy footsteps. "No, Rafal." "We talk now." I said the name to keep myself anchored. Saying his name had once been an act of relief. Now it was a sentence I measured against facts. I watched him watch me. He invited me with one slow hand to close the distance he decided on. Inside the car, he spoke in short sentences that tried to wedge certainty back into the space between us. "Alina, Marco made a mistake." I told him to stop. "Simple mistake." He Marco's name like delivering a statement of fact. I answered with the receipt and the key. He answered with a name I could not prove meant nothing. The first shift came then. Doubt flipped to a cold fear that moved through my hands. My fingers trembled when I fingered my locket. I drove myself to the foyer of my apartment the next morning, because I needed to be around people who could tell me how ridiculous I was being. I wanted Sophia's practical voice. Sophia met me under the chandeliers, arms hugging a coat to her chest like a guard. "Alina." "Sophia, I've seen him with women." Her eyes darted to the building entrance as if expecting someone to read our conversation on the marble hallway. "Sophia, tell me plainly. Did you see Rafal with someone else?" I asked. Naming him made the risk real. My hands kept finding the locket and smoothing it. Sophia rubbed the side of her neck. "I saw him leave with a woman from the back entrance 2 weeks ago. They weren't careful. I didn't mention it because I thought I was wrong." Her voice dropped when she said that last part. The admission landed like an object on the floor between us. Sophia's warning tightened something that had been loose. I found myself listening for the next sound in the lobby, as if the building might reply. My second emotion shift arrived. Fear widened into a sharpened, protective clarity. I decided to act. "Where did she go?" I asked. Sophia gave me an address near one of Rafal's known properties and then pushed a folded newspaper into my palm. "Be careful, Alina. Don't tell him you know." Her words felt like both caution and accusation. I went to Rafal's club that evening because questions had teeth now. Marco met me in the back office, coffee cooling in his hand. He was age-worn in the way men who manage danger become. Shoulders tight, voice low. "Miss Marlowe, Marco, Rafal isn't here. He meet a handle." I cut him off. "Marco, I know the name on this receipt. I found the key in his glove box." I said it plainly. My sentences were short, sharp, because I had promised myself to speak plainly. Marco's eyes flicked to the floor. He swallowed as a rival sniffing around. "They sent someone to make trouble. A woman got tangled in it. Rafal moved things to keep her safe. He didn't have a choice." His explanation came out as if rehearsed. Rafal arrived then from the back hallway, his coat still damp from rain. He shut the door to the office and let the room breathe in the sound of his step. "Alina," he said. He didn't try a smooth explanation. He stood beside Marco and steepled his fingers. "Sit with me, Rafal. Let me tell you why this isn't what you think." I stayed standing and let him attempt to corral the situation. In that room, Marco slid an envelope across the desk to Rafal. Rafal opened it and his face did not change at first. Inside was a torn photograph and a terse set of notes about a rival family's probe. Marco explained. A woman had been connected to their enemies' attempts to unsettle Raffal's alliances. Raffal had ordered the woman sheltered at a nearby hotel under a false name until they could move her to safety. We don't expose people to questions, Marco. Not even the ones who caused trouble. His language framed the problem as operations. My reaction hardened into disbelief. You hid her here without telling me because she was a liability, I asked. Raffal let out a short breath. Elena, I tried to keep you out of it. I kept you safe. He the word safe like it justified silence. You would have been a target. I felt my jaw clench. You would have been a target, I repeated, tasting the shape of it like a bitter medicine. After I left the club, I found a white envelope tucked under the door of my workplace that afternoon. The envelope was unmarked except for a single line written in block letters, "Stay away." My hands folded the paper the way someone folds a map they don't intend to follow. Detective Alvarez came the next day with a bland file and an even, flat voice. Ms. Marlowe, Detective Alvarez, placing the file on the diner table between coffee and a sugar packet. His fingers tapped the cover like punctuation. We've linked a key registered to your area code to a missing persons report. We thought you should know. I slid the receipt across the table. This was in Raffal's car. He says it's a misunderstanding. The detective looked at me without surprise. Misunderstandings can be dangerous, Ms. Marlowe. Especially when there are intersecting loyalties. His words made the word danger snap into focus. That was the moment my fear pushed into a decision I could act on. I had believed forgiveness could protect me. Instead, forgiveness had been covering an event I hadn't named. Now I had a file, a threatening note, and a photograph with a face I didn't recognize. I decided to confront him where secrets were stored. I went to Raffal's safe room that night. I brought the receipt, the envelope, the photograph, and my journal. I wanted him to see what I saw and to give me a truth not dressed in half forms. The safe room smelled of cedar and leather. Lamps were dim. Marco hovered near the doorway like a sentinel. Raffal sat behind a low desk, hands steepled, the gold signet ring catching a slice of light. Elena, he said. His voice was steady. You shouldn't have come alone. I laid the receipt on the desk and pushed the photograph toward him. Raffal, this, I said, tapping the photograph, is someone connected to a missing person. Detective Alvarez has a file. Marco says you were protecting her. Why did you hide this from me? My sentence ended in a question that demanded more than comfort. Raffal's face tightened because I needed to fix it fast, because I couldn't let her become a thread that unravels people I care about. I thought I could handle it without dragging you into the danger. He paused. Elena, I have my ways. I can keep you safe. His hand brushed the photograph as if to move it away. My second emotion shift threaded through that touch. Protective clarity hardened into anger at being excluded. Raffal, don't say you can keep me safe by lying to me. I said his name short. I used his name to hold him accountable. He stood then and walked around the desk. Marco closed the door softly behind him. The room narrowed until it fit only the three of us. Why didn't you tell me the truth? I asked. Raffal's voice dropped. Because I thought I was protecting you. His answer came with a brittle tenderness. The exchange turned rapid. Raffal, you hid a key in my glove box. Raffal, you kept me from knowing a woman was missing. Raffal, you let me find evidence myself. Each repetition pried at the place where his protection became secrecy. He replied in short, measured lines. Elena, names get mixed. Elena, I moved her for her safety. Elena, I didn't tell you because your safety mattered more than my explanations. Marco listened without speaking. I asked for a single concrete proof of his intent. Show me the hotel reservation. Show me the chain of custody. Let me decide if what you did was mercy or something else. My voice did not shake. Raffal hesitated for a long breath. I can't show you everything, Elena. Some things would endanger her further. He stepped closer, but I can tell you this. I never planned to hurt you. I never planned to... He stopped. His hands went to his pockets. He looked like a man trying to hold a storm in his palms. I moved forward until my knees nearly touched his. I put my hand on the desk and let the photograph sit between us. Then tell me the truth now, Raffal. Not a version that keeps me safe from information, but one that treats me like an equal to your fear. My voice edged thin and steady. He looked at me as if calculating a cost. Marco cleared his throat. Rival families are probing Raffal's holdings, Elena. They use women to plant stories to distract, to test loyalty. Raffal had to create distance quickly. That photograph was part of a setup. We sheltered her under an alias until she could be moved. Then someone left the note at your workplace. Marco's voice made the danger concrete. A named method, chain of action. Detective Alvarez's file echoed in my head. The logic fit together, but fit does not equal truth. I needed confirmation. I asked Raffal for the hotel receipt's folio number and the name on the booking. He gave me a number, and then he stopped himself. I can't give you the booking name. I will get you the folio. I promise, he promised in the way his voice lowered when he meant it. I felt a decision assembling itself from smaller movements. A journal closed, a locket touched, a breath drawn and held. My hands trembled. I decided then to set a boundary that would show what forgiveness without truth had cost me. I stood up. Rafel, I need distance. I need to see my own grief in full and decide what forgiveness means without being soothed into silence, saying it pulled a rawness tight against the words. He tried to take my hand. Rafal's fingers closed near my wrist. Elena, please. He used my name like an appeal. Elena, you know I would do anything to protect you. His thumb brushed my skin in a motion I had once welcomed. I withdrew my hand slowly. Rafel, I forgive when I know. I cannot forgive to avoid naming what hurts me. I did not look away. My voice kept its shape. For a moment no one spoke. Marco's presence felt like a held breath in the room. Then Marco left with a small nod. If you change your mind, Elena, he said, we will be in touch. His words did not threaten. They were a fact of the world he moved in. Rafel watched me pack my journal and my locket into my bag. He quietly, if you go, be careful, I answered. I will be careful. I turned the knob and left the safe room behind the click of the door. I walked out into the night and down the marble steps into damp air. The city smelled of rain and exhaust. My chest felt like a knot I had to unknot with deliberate movements. At the curb I pulled my journal open and wrote a few lines about names and small mercies. I pressed the locket into the page as if leaving a mark. My writing hand shook. The morning came while I still had ink on the page. At dawn I sat on my windowsill with the journal open and a pressed wildflower between pages. Light came in flat and honest. I wrote that forgiveness could not be a way to silence my pain. I wrote the receipt number and Rafel's folio, and that Detective Alvarez had the file. I wrote that I had asked for the hotel's folio, and that Rafal had promised to produce it. The action of writing made the choices feel less like dreams and more like plans. I closed the journal with a slow motion and tucked it under my arm. I felt both lighter and more exposed. The sequence of events from the glove box to the safe room had reshaped the rules between Rafal and me. I had named my boundary and left it in the doorway. A car door closed across the street. I listened. Then there was a soft sound at my building's front. An envelope slid beneath the lobby door. I did not open it. Instead, I set the locket in my palm, felt the cool metal, and stood. I walked to the door and picked up the envelope from the welcome mat. There was no return address. I held it up and breathed once, then turned the envelope over to read only the single, precise line written on the paper. You were warned. I folded it into my pocket and walked out into the cool dawn toward the street where Rafel's car had been parked the night before. I found the photograph before I even reached the stairs. Suspicion tightened my throat when I slid the mail through the slot and felt a damp corner against my palm. I unfolded the paper with one hand and saw Rafel in a suit, an arm around a woman I did not know, the flash catching a laugh that belonged to someone else. The photograph smelled faintly of rain and cheap perfume. I remembered the brass hotel key and the crumpled receipt from the glove box the night before. That memory pushed me forward, not back. I shoved the photograph into my coat and walked up 3 flights without looking at the hallway lights. My steps matched the quick breath in my chest. At the door I paused and counted the keys on my ring. I held them like proof I belonged somewhere safe. Suspicion was doing a job. It made me check his number twice, made me fold the photograph into the pocket where my locket rested. I did not want to be the woman who let questions pass. I locked my door and dropped my bag on the hallway chair. The photograph lay on my kitchen table under the lamp. I touched the face of the woman Rafal had been laughing with. Her hair was shorter than mine. She wore a silver dress. The receipt from the glove box said Hotel Cardenas, room 301. The hotel key from the glove box had the same brass patina. Those were facts I could hold. I called Sophia. The phone went to her car voicemail. I texted, "Meet me at the diner now." Her reply came 5 minutes later. On my way, that small, quick exchange moved me out of the flat and into action. Doubt was a thing I had let sit quietly before. Tonight it had been handed to me by a stranger and shoved into my hallway. Sophia was waiting under the diner neon, coat collar up, cigarette already gone when I sat down. She folded the photograph and let me watch her face. "You look at this and tell me what you feel," she said. Sophia's voice hit the table. It held the impatience that had kept her a private investigator for door money. I said, "I feel like I was told a lie the same way I was told a bedtime story as a child." My voice cut. "Sophia, you re-forgiving him to avoid the hurt again, Elena. Stop using forgiveness as a lock." Her words landed with a hard sound. Anger rose in me, sudden and hot. I said his name. "Rafel," I said. What did you do? Sophia folded the photograph and passed it back. Her thumb rubbed the wet edge. She added, we can check Hotel Cardena's records. I can meet Marco at the gala. He'll know if someone slipped a camera into the ballroom. Don't go alone tonight. I let the plan fill the air between us. Planning steadied my hands. I told Sophia to stay and to call Marco. She smirked and said, I will. You bring your courage, Elena. I'll bring coffee. We laughed once, short and brittle, and that was the reset I needed. The diner's neon hummed. I folded the photograph and slid it into the front pocket of my coat again. Moving made the fear manageable. I dressed for the gala with the photograph folded in the pocket of the dress I chose. The dress had a muted sheen, dark charcoal, cut modest but sharp at the shoulders. I tucked my locket inside and threaded my hair behind one ear, like I always did when I wanted to appear calm. On the drive there I remembered Rafal's steady hands on the steering wheel the night I found the hotel key. Memory shifted my motion from anger to a hollow waiting. I told myself I deserved the truth. At the ballroom I felt everyone at once. The hum of conversation, the clink of glass, the soft flare of candles. Rafal arrived like a shadow cut from midnight, tailored suit, gold signet catching the light. He moved toward the center and the woman from the photograph was at his side, smiling in a way that did not include me. I stood at the edge of the room and felt my jaw set. I crossed the floor, people smoothed around me. I reached Rafal and placed the photograph on his palm without explanation. He looked at it the same way he measured risk, cool, slow. Rafal, I said, and the name struck the hush. Who is she? He did not take my hand. He set the photograph on a tray and told his lieutenant, Marco, handle this. Marco stepped forward with a flat face and a broad shoulder that moved between me and the woman. I said, Marco, don't remove me from where I belong. Marco's voice was low. Elena, step aside, this is not the place. I pushed past his shoulder. The woman laughed at something Rafal. I saw the small line at the corner of her mouth where the flash had shown her teeth. I kept my voice on the table. Rafal, tell me the truth. Tell me what that key meant, tell me why I found this. He smiled once, smaller than I expected. Not here, he said. We can speak upstairs. You'll make a scene. I felt other eyes. Some seemed to judge, others watched for the entertainment. I stepped toward him anyway. Marco reached with a hand that looked like an arrest and said, now, Elena. He moved me out of the ballroom with a brief, efficient motion. We passed the service corridor. Fluorescent lights hummed above. Marco closed the door and turned, keeping his voice low. You should not have that photograph, he said. He did not look at the picture. He looked at me. Someone put it in your mailbox. They wanted to see how you'd react. Rafal has ordered surveillance around you, Miss Marlowe. He's testing the ground. That line hit differently than betrayal. Fear replaced anger in 3 seconds. I stepped back. Why would he test me? I asked. My hands were empty. Marco, because when you react, people move. It tells him where you stand. It tells him who can touch you. I said Rafal's name the way people say a talisman. Rafal. Marco's jaw tightened. He will protect you. But he will also manipulate what you see. A fresh wave of doubt rose. I had assumed his protection and his evasions were separate. Marco's words bundled them together. I left the corridor with the photograph burning a space in my mind. The hallway lights blurred from my hurry. An elevator dinged. That small mechanical note pulled me back into the sequence of places I suddenly had to think through. I followed Rafal to his office. He had a narrow suite above the ballroom with a glass wall that looked out over the valet lights. He closed the door and the click sounded like a judge's gavel. I put the photograph on his desk and pushed it forward. I kept my voice even but firm. Tell me the truth about the hotel key and the woman in this photo. Rafal unfolded his fingers and steepled them. Elena, you found a provocation. Someone wants you to doubt me. I swallowed. Someone planted the photograph in my mailbox, Rafal. That's an escalation. Who planted it? And why would you order surveillance on me? He rested one elbow on the desk and turned his face to the window for a beat. His jaw worked. There are people who watch anyone close to me. That means surveillance sometimes reaches you. I ordered it to protect you, not to trap you. I moved forward. Protect me, you mean control me. He stood. He walked to the window and placed his palm on the glass where the city lights blurred into the dark. I want you safe. I cannot always explain how I do it. I can explain it later. Right now I need you to trust the process. Trust. The word tasted like salt. I had spent months using forgiveness as a shield. His calm voice pushed me toward acceptance, and my body almost folded. Then a different, sharper sound cut the office, a grunt from the stairwell, and a shuffling like a body colliding with railing. I moved toward the door. Rafal's face changed in a fraction, measured into motion. A man lunged out of the stairwell as I reached the door. He wore a black hoodie and a plain, cheap mask. The attacker had a knife that flashed in the corridor light. I had time only to see metal and the angle of his shoulder. Marco shoved himself between the attacker and me. Marco's arm blocked the knife. It sliced the cuff of his jacket. He shouted, "Get down!" Raphael moved like a stone launched. He knocked the attacker back with a single, brutal swing. The attacker went down hard, the knife clattering across the tile. I felt the air in my lungs leave in a single pushed sound. The man on the floor made a keening noise and then quieted. Raphael crouched over him with one hand on the throat and one on the jaw, a quick check for life. He rose and turned to me. I tasted metal. My hands were shaking. I gripped my locket until the small gold warmed under my thumb. "Are you?" I started. Raphael walked back to me and put his gloved hand against my shoulder. His fingers were steady, his knuckles white under leather. "You are safe now." I told them I would not let anything touch you. Fear and relief collided. I felt dizzy in a way that had no words. My knees threatened to fold. Marco grunted and doubled over, the cut on his sleeve showing a red smear. He nothing at first. Then he looked at Raphael and then at me. "They timed the gallery exit. Someone wanted to make you run." I forced a breath. "Who?" Marco spat the name in parts. "Not sure. Could be a rival family. Could be someone inside. But whoever it is wanted a reaction from Raphael and from you." Raphael's jaw set. He looked at me like a man considering a chessboard with missing pieces. "You should go to the car, now." Outside under the valet lights, the night smelled of brake fluid and wet stone. Raphael shut the back door and I climbed into the rear seat. He did not sit with me. He slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. The car smelled of cedar and tobacco. His fingers found the steering wheel and tapped once. Inside the vehicle, the photograph sat between my knees like a small fault line. I pulled out the photograph and held it toward him. My voice came thin. "Why would someone put this in my mailbox if not to hurt me?" Raphael's eyes did not meet mine. He started the engine with a slow turn. "Because I have enemies who will use any soft place they see." I said, "You could have told me about surveillance. You could have told me the truth about the key." He glanced at me, a look that owned regret and distance at once. "I thought I could control the way you saw things. I thought it would keep you from being dragged into whatever I handle. I underestimated how it would sit in you." I listened to the tires roll over wet asphalt. My fingers rubbed the edge of the photograph until the paper thinned. Emotion shifted in me again, from suspicion to anger to a cold clarity. I pressed my thumb to the tear in the receipt and let the paper fan open. "I forgave him to keep the hurt from finding me," I said, my voice low but not pleading. "I used mercy like a bandage until it stopped bleeding." He looked at me then, really looked, as if measuring whether I would let the bandage stay. "You did what you had to do to survive," he said. "But I see now that survival became a habit and it kept you from naming what happened." My laugh was small. "There is naming and there is settling." I settled for his versions for a long time. We drove in silence for a while. Then Sophia's name came out of me. "Sophia will dig." Marco already said he'd look. "I need to know who slipped the photograph and where the woman fits into the receipts. I need answers, Raphael. Not explanations to keep me quiet." He slowed at a red light and his fingers flexed on the wheel. "I can get you answers," he said. "But answers will bring other people. They will bring risk." I slid the photograph into my palm and folded it closed. I choose risk over being kept in the dark. That was a decision more than a sentence. The car moved and the city lights smeared by. Back at my building, I opened the door with keys that felt familiar and strange. I placed the photograph on the table again and did not fold it away. I unlocked my journal and wrote the time and the photograph's details. I wrote with my left hand, a habit I used when I wanted my writing to be steadier than my voice. I cross-checked the receipt number against an old entry in my wallet where I kept small paper records. The hotel stamp matched. My hand traced the brass key's edge in memory from the glove box. The facts lined up: the photograph, the receipt, the key. They were evidence, not proof of motive. That distinction mattered. At dawn I sat on the windowsill with the journal on my knees. The sky outside was washed pale. I turned the photograph face down on the table and wrapped my hands around the locket at my throat until the metal calmed my fingers. I wrote one sentence in the margin: "I will stop forgiving to avoid pain." I dated it. That sentence was a wrong mercy corrected into a deliberate act. The chapter had a kind of closure, small and sharp. An attacker had shown that danger existed. Marco had told me Raphael watched me. Sophie had promised to search records and call contacts. Raphael had saved me and then retreated into the only language he had left: control. I could feel the edges of my choices settling into place. I would not let forgiveness be a bandage again. I put the photograph into my journal between pages, where I kept other small things: a theater ticket stub, a pressed receipt, the corner of a map. I closed the journal and set it on the table with the photograph beneath. The apartment was quiet. My phone buzzed on the counter. The screen read, "Marco." I answered. Yes, his voice was blunt. "We found camera footage from the alley behind Hotel Cardenas. The woman in the photo left with a man who is not Raphael. She used a taxi. We've retraced the taxi driver's route. We'll meet at noon. Bring the photograph." I folded my hands around the phone. The day had already pulled a new string. I said, "I'll be there." I hung up and turned off the lamp. The journal lay closed and the photograph lay weighed under it. The car idled in my memory. Raphael's hand had been firm on my shoulder. Marco had a cut across his sleeve. Sophia had smoke in the corner of her smile. I blew out the candle I had lit and left a small place of light on the windowsill where the journal rested. The photograph sat under the journal like a coin under glass. My choice, "No More Wrong Mercies," had been written down and dated. It was not a speech. It was a plan. The phone rang once more. I did not answer it at first. When I did, the voice on the other end said only one sentence. "Someone left another photograph in your mailbox 5 minutes ago." I set the phone down. The sound of the next event arrived like a step on the stair. I stood and reached for my coat. The photograph in the journal pressed cold against my palm as I moved toward the door. Emotion root, suspicion. Emotion shifts. Suspicion, anger, fear, clarity, resolve. I stepped off the curb and into the service alley because the rain made the theater's back door sound like a drum. I saw him before he noticed me. Raphael bent over a woman who kept her free hand pressed to his chest, her fingers trembling against the cloth of his suit. Suspicion tightened my throat the moment I recognized his profile in the amber light. Suspicion pushed me forward. I could not walk away and pretend I had not seen the envelope slip into her coat. The first 5 sentences are not about memory. They are a sharp, impossible present. I moved closer until the wet hem of my coat left a dark streak on the concrete. The woman looked younger than me, hair plastered to her temples, eyes wide. She studied Raphael the way a patient studies a doctor. Raphael's jaw was set. He did not smile. He did not soothe. He gave a small instruction without raising his voice, and then turned away. I heard the catch in my own breath before I said anything. "Raphael," my voice came out flat. "What is this?" He turned like he had been waiting for that name. "Alina." He did not step back. "You shouldn't be here." Raphael's voice was low and controlled. The same voice that had calmed me the first time I needed him. The control in it made my suspicion flare hotter. I remembered the key I had found in his glove box weeks before, and the crumpled receipt with another woman's name. Details that had lodged in my mouth like a bitter seed. That memory sat behind every question I asked. The woman pressed the envelope closer to her chest. A part of me wanted to reach for it and tear it open. Another part remembered standing in the car at that club, my fingers finding the brass hotel key, my demand that night splitting the leather silence between us. I swallowed and spoke again because silence now would be cooperation. "Who is she, Raphael?" I said. "What did you give her?" Raphael looked at the woman, Sophia. I would learn her name later, for a long second. He folded his hands as if arranging an argument in neat pieces. "She needs help," he said. "I am only making sure she is safe." "Safe how?" I stepped closer. "Safe behind a ledger and envelopes. Safe with payments instead of truth." Raphael's face did not change. He kept looking at me as if my voice were an intruder. "I keep people alive, Elena. Sometimes that looks ugly." The sentence landed like a stone. Luca appeared at the mouth of the alley with a cigarette still lit between 2 fingers. He walked in without knocking on the wet bricks of the wall, and his presence turned the private exchange into a display of control. Luca's jacket had the same midnight cut as Raphael's suit, but his body made the alley feel narrower. He smiled at me like a man who had catalogued the exact moment I might choke and had decided not to reach for help. "Elena." Luca's tone was neutral but sharp. "We were leaving. Come with us and we'll explain inside." I looked at Raphael. The rain had glued a dark line along his cheek. He did not say please. He did not tell Luca to leave. He only shrugged, the small movement that made him look older and more tired than he already was. The presence of Luca made the argument different. It became about power, not explanation. I felt the next shift in me, from suspicion to a kind of stunned anger. I stepped forward and grabbed Raphael's sleeve. My fingers closed on the fabric where he had the small crescent scar above his eyebrow, the scar I had traced once when we were alone and he thought I slept. "Don't make this about power, Raphael. Tell me the truth." I kept my voice low, but I did not let it shiver. He looked at my hand on his sleeve and then at the envelope in Sophia's coat. "This is about a witness," he said. "She saw something she shouldn't have. A witness who gets cash in an envelope." I asked. A witness who sits at the edge of my life while you keep secrets. Sophia's eyes flicked between us. After a long breath she spoke, voice brittle. Please. Please don't make me talk here. Her fingers tightened on the coat. Mr. Moretti, your men asked me to be quiet. They'd help me find my sister. Rafal's jaw moved. He cut the conversation with a single order to Luca, take her to the car. Quietly, Luca caught Sophia's arm and guided her like a shepherding hand. He did not roughen his grip. He used a gloved palm that smelled faintly of leather and tobacco when he released her at the car. The sight shifted something in me from anger back to a shaky, fathomless worry. If he sheltered witnesses, what did that shelter cost? If his mercy came with strings whose voice stitched the strings together, I did not go home that night. The theater's marquee threw a rectangle of light onto my palms when I stood under it and dialed Maya's number with fingers that still did not stop trembling. Maya answered on the third ring and arrived 30 minutes later with a takeout carton and the smallest light I owned. Maya sat across from me at my kitchen table and laid out a small stack of photographs and one phone screenshot. Look at this, she said. Look at the transfers. Look at the receipt you found, and this, she pointed to the bank notification in the screenshot. Regular transfers, noted as care payment, to an account that linked to a small agency tied to Sophia's neighborhood. Rafal has been paying this for months, Maya. He's not just helping when it suits him. He's arranged things regularly. I felt my mind tighten with a new set of answers. Suspicion that began in the alley shifted into a harsher question. Had I been forgiving because I loved him, or forgiving because his interventions smoothed over my pain? My hands kept touching the worn edge of my journal, my usual gesture when I palmed an answer to a question I wasn't ready to say aloud. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Why keep it secret? Maya shrugged and unfolded the receipt with practiced hands. Protection looks different if you live inside it, Alina. If you outside, it looks like the opposite. We planned nothing and everything at once. I could wait until I collected proof and walked into his penthouse with paper in my hands. Or I could confront him right then, in his space, and demand an explanation that did not come with envelopes. I chose the penthouse because I wanted his face when he had to say the word that would decide whether his mercy included me or excluded me. The study smelled of cedar and old leather when Rafal opened the door. He stood framed by the corridor light with that gold signet ring catching a thin flash. Luca lingered in the doorway like a second shadow. Rafal's eyes measured me steadily. My voice did not break when I said, I have copies of the transfers. I know the receipts. I saw you with Sophia. Rafal moved his hands slowly and closed the door. He led me to the study table with a motion that was equal parts invitation and command. Sit, he said. Listen. He gestured to the armchair opposite his desk. I sat. The chair still smelled faintly of his colon. I put the photographs and the phone screenshot on the table and pushed them toward him. He did not touch them for a long moment. The pause made my chest hollow in a way that had nothing to do with air and everything to do with expectation. Sophia saw a killing, Rafal finally. She saw men from another crew pull a gun and shoot a courier. She called the address from a payphone. I intercepted the report and brought her here. If I shelter her, she gives testimony where it matters. His words were matter of fact. He did not elaborate on methods. So you pay her, I said. You pay her so she will keep quiet around strangers but speak when investigators ask. So you get to pick how truth is shaped. My voice hardened on the last clause. He did not deny it. He only looked at me and then at Luca, who had folded his arms and stared at the floor. Rafal's control stayed intact, but the edges of it were visible now. I do what must be done, Elena. I weigh a dangerous balance. Sometimes protection requires decisions you won't like. When he said that, a new emotion uncoiled inside me, a mix of betrayal and the first real clarity. The suspicion had become clarity. Clarity had become anger. Anger moved into a quiet, steady refusal. I remembered the brass key in his glove box and the photograph caught in the mail slot. I remembered the small mercies he offered me when I cried and how I took them, because I wanted our small life to hold together. Detective Ortiz knocked on the penthouse door before Rafal had a chance to finish the next sentence. The knock sounded different than a normal knock. It had authority and a warranted weight. Luca answered with his usual calm. Detective Ortiz stepped into the foyer with a badge that flashed under the warm light and a warrant folded in his gloved hand. Miss Moretti, we have a few questions about your network and about financial transactions tied to witness movements, Detective Ortiz. We also have a statement from someone who says they saw a courier shot near the theater. Rafal's eyes moved to mine the moment the detective said witness. Ortiz, he said, if you have questions, let's find a time. Ortiz set the warrant on the small table by the door. We can do this quietly, Rafal. or we can do it with subpoenas. I prefer quiet." Luca's jaw tightened. He turned his head toward the hallway, where Luca had already signaled someone by putting a finger to his mouth. The sudden movement made everything feel like a machine resetting. Raphael reached for a glass of whiskey and set it down without drinking. At the dining table later that night, Raphael and Luca spoke in low voices while I sat where the light hit my hands like an accusation. The conversation shifted from legal maneuvering to practical options. I overheard enough to understand the offer they planned to make me. "We want her to say she was somewhere else that night. Luca. We will ask Alina to confirm it. Raphael will make arrangements so her name ceases to appear in any investigative threads." Raphael's voice was quieter. "Alina, we can make this go away. I can make it so no one comes after you. All I need is your cooperation." The voice in me that had learned to forgive to keep the peace heard the familiarity in that line. Forgiveness had been a currency between us. I forgave him for absences and for cold replies, and he forgave me for the small rebellions that broke our fragile calm. But here forgiveness asked me to lie. Forgiveness now smelled like an agreement to participate in concealment. My next emotion was a split second of panic and then a firm, steady refusal. I pushed back my chair. No, the word left my mouth like a slammed door. "I will not lie for you, Raphael. I will not be part of that." Raphael's eyes narrowed. "Alina, Raphael, you cannot ask me to erase what I saw." I kept my voice even. "You mean to accept things before you mean to look away." "I won't do that now." There was a rapid exchange between Raphael and Luca then, 3 short sentences where they argued in clipped tones about risk. "Luca, we don't need a scene here." "Raphael, we need control." Luca answered. "Control costs too much when it costs her." The back and forth lasted less than 30 seconds, but it tightened the room like a drawn wire. Detective Ortiz watched us from the doorway as if timing our collapse. When I realized they intended to ask me to lie, I moved. I stood and pulled out my phone. I sent a single message to Maya with a photograph attached and the word. Now, Maya had always been a quiet lever in my life. She kept small records, folded evidence in envelopes like a librarian filing away dangerous books. She answered the message in minutes with a text that said, "I'm at the precinct. They can take it." I stood at the table and laid the photographed receipt and the transfer screenshot where Detective Ortiz could see them. "Detective Ortiz," I said, "these show transfers from Raphael Moretti's network to an account that was used to pay Sofia. I will sign a statement." Raphael's face changed when he realized I had chosen truth over his shelter. He walked to the doorway and stopped, fingers splayed against the frame. "Elena," he said quietly, "you are making a choice that changes everything." The choice moved me. My heart hammered in my ribs, my fingers tight on the edge of the table. I felt fear. Fear of retaliation, fear of losing what fragile softness we had built, fear of the unknown. Fear sat under the clarity I'd found. But another shift came then. Fear turned to a clear, hard resolve to refuse complicity. I thought of the key in his glove box, the photograph in the mail slot, the way I had smoothed my own pain with forgiveness. I would not smooth over the truth again. Detective Ortiz took the documents and asked me to recount what I had seen. I spoke in short sentences. I told him about the envelope in the alley, about the transfers, about the photograph in my doorway. I watched Raphael listen and did not look away when his jaw clenched. Raphael moved toward the window and looked out at the city lights. He put a hand to his face and exhaled through his nose. Luca stood a step behind him. The room felt suspended for a breath. Then Raphael turned to me and said, "You forced my hand, Elena. You have no idea what that will cost you." I answered without hesitation. "And you forced mine when you kept me out of the loop. You forced me to choose between silence and who I am." Something in Raphael's expression changed. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't even remorse rendered in words. It was a folding of the shoulders, a shrinking of the space he usually protected with posture. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the table near mine. The gesture was small, like the signet ring resting on wood, and I felt my muscles clench. Luca moved to the door. He signaled Sofia had already been taken away to an undisclosed safe house. The detective left to prepare paperwork and told us he would return with follow-up questions. He closed the door behind him and left a hush that felt too loud. I walked to the foyer with my journal under my arm. I did not know what would happen next. I had taken a step that could set off a chain of things I could not control. Raphael watched me the whole way as if cataloguing the consequences of my choice. I caught the small crescent scar near his eyebrow and remembered tracing it once. Memories pressed up against my resolve, but they did not break me. At dawn I sat on my windowsill with the journal open and the locket at my throat. I wrote the sequence of events into it in short lines. Alley, envelope, transfers, Pentos, refusal, Detective Ortiz. Each stroke of the pen made the night more solid, more something that had happened and could be shown. My hands still shook slightly, but the shaking was not the same as before. It was a tremor born of the cost of honesty. There was a rap at my door that morning, hard and urgent. I set the journal down and walked to the door. My stomach tightened. I opened the door a crack and saw Detective Ortiz in the hall, his coat wet from the rain and an official envelope in his hand. "Elena," he said, "we need to talk about witness protection and next steps." I stepped back to let him in. I felt an ache for what I had given up and a fierce, clean relief at the same time. I had refused forgiveness that would have required my silence. I had chosen a different kind of cost. The world outside was pale with dawn. Inside the apartment, my journal lay open and the photograph of the transfer glinted on the table. The knock at the door became the immediate, concrete sound that ended the chapter of a choice made and began the chapter of consequences. I closed the door behind Detective Ortiz and sat down to answer his questions. I shoved the study door open and found Rafael slamming a drawer shut while a woman I didn't know hurried past him into the hall. Suspicion hit first, a tight, familiar knot under my ribs, and that suspicion pushed my feet forward before my voice did. "What is going on here?" I said. My voice sounded small in the study, and Rafael's hand hovered on the drawer as if he could still close the night's explanation away. Suspicion lodged in those first seconds and steered everything I did afterward. I stepped into the room because I had to see, because photographs and receipts had already taught me not to accept silence. My hand brushed the back of a leather armchair. The grain left dust on my fingertips. The woman paused in the hallway, shoulders hunched, and Rafael's jaw tightened in a way I had seen only twice before. The way a man who gives orders tightens when he is surprised to be questioned. My throat opened and closed with a dry sound. "Rafael," I said, more controlled than I felt. He turned slowly. "Elena." He did not say her name. He said mine first, as if the syllable could reshape what I had walked into. The unknown woman retreated into a doorway and did not meet my eyes. Marta stepped into the hall behind her, clean and efficient in a dark coat, and for a second the three of them made a triangle of explanation and deflection. Marta was the first to speak. "She's under protection, Marta," and she had the file in her hand like proof should be enough. Her voice was even, precise. "Marta carries facts like a shield." The way she set the paper down on the desk, face up with typed words and a stamped header, drew everyone's attention toward an external object I could handle, that moved me a fraction, proof rather than promises. Detective Alvarez arrived 15 minutes later, wet from rain, carrying an envelope that smelled faintly of old smoke. He did not knock. He opened the door with a shoulder and stepped in like someone who had the right to make doors rise for him. He placed the envelope on the desk with both palms, as if the simple act of setting it down were a verdict. "The name on this list connects to Luca Moretti," he said without preface. Rafael's shoulders went square. I felt suspicion change under my skin into a hot, quick anger. Anger pushed me forward so that my sentences came faster. "Luca," I said. "Why is that her name? What does Luca have to do with any of this?" "Rafael." Rafael's thumb pressed the seam of the drawer he had tried to close. He did not answer quickly. He does not move quickly when a choice matters. He offered a bargain in the kind of voice that tries to make danger sound like tenderness. "I protected her because she has information about a rival network, Rafael. I kept it quiet because exposing it would draw them to you." His hands were steady. He measured his words as if each one were a weight he could balance on a scale. "I will not tell you everything now, because I cannot risk her life. Elena, I'm telling you this much for your safety." My anger shifted into a slow, stubborn fear, not the cinematic sharp fear that makes someone bolt. It was the steady, horizontal pressure of realizing other people were deciding what risks I would carry. I stepped in front of the desk and felt the room narrow. Leather armchair, low lamp, the rain, slicked windows beyond. "You decide safety for me," I said. "You decide which secrets I can know. That's the pattern. You make the choice and I forgive it to keep quiet." Rafael's expression cracked for a fraction, a small admission that he understood. "I do it to keep you safe," he said every time. His voice was low. The syllables of his excuse landed like coins on a table, each one familiar from nights when I had accepted a lie wrapped in protection. I remembered the glovebox key and the crumpled receipt from that night outside the club. I remembered the photograph I found in the mail slot. A flash of Rafael's arm around another woman. Those memories did not appear as hazy feelings. They arrived as solid objects I could name and hold up. I said so. "The glovebox, the photograph. You made bargains before that I called mercy, Rafael. You me to forgive the quiet, and I did." Forgiveness became easier than grief. Marta's face did not change. She is practiced at holding steady. We have documentation that links Luca's men to threats against witnesses, she said. This woman, she tapped the file, was marked for silence. Rafael offered protection. He did not bring her here for romance. Detective Alvarez slid the envelope toward me and lifted the corner of a paper so I could see a list of names. The paper's edge was wet where his sleeve had brushed it. Luca's men are expanding. That name appears on a list tied to his operation. If Rafael protects her, he risks becoming a target himself. If he doesn't, she could be killed or used. At this, the room contracted again. There was a courier's knock at the service door and a young man in a delivery jacket handed Rafael a small envelope. He was pale, hands trembling slightly. There was a dark, damp smear at one corner. The courier did not speak. He left a single folded paper and walked away like someone who had already given too much. Rafael unfolded it with fingers that shook despite his attempts at stillness. Inside was one short line written in a hand I did not know, and a single smear of red along the edge. I read the line aloud because saying it made the danger a fact in the room. You chose her over the family, it said. No signature. Just the accusation and a smear that looked like hurried blood. That note changed the calculus in my mouth. It made explicit what I had felt. Rafael's choices had consequences that touched other people's bodies. Fear moved through me in a new way, not theoretical, not a pressure in my chest, but a concrete image of Luca's men crossing a map and putting names on a page. I turned to Rafael. Is this what you mean by protection? Paying a cost I did not agree to. My voice did not shake. The anger had steadied into determination. An emotion that would not accept quiet bargaining. Rafael did what he does when he negotiates with himself. He steepled his fingers and looked at the window, then at me. I kept silent because I feared what would happen if I exposed them, he said. I feared they would come for everyone I care about. There was a rhythm to our conversation that had nothing to do with politeness. It was a sequence of stops and starts, each line a test. Marta repeated details from the file. Detective Alvarez pushed me to ask the questions he could not ask out loud. At one point I forced 3 short sentences out in a row. Did you ever consider telling them the truth? Did you ever turn over proof? Did you ever hand these names to the police? Rafael's answer came in a single, measured line. Not until now. That was the crack I needed. Not until now meant there was still a choice. The choice had weight. I felt my suspicion shift into something else again, not blind fury, but a clear refusal to be the place he returned to that made his life easier. I said, then choose now. Not for me because you want to fix me, but because you owe people the truth. If you keep quiet, you choose the risk I will carry. If you expose Luca, you accept the cost. Detective Alvarez folded his arms and said, if he brings us proof, we can move. If not, Luca moves first. Marta looked between Rafael and me like someone calculating possible fallout. For a moment the tension was an equation on a whiteboard. Variables, possible outcomes, risks measured out in names and addresses. Luca's men were not far away. Alvarez's radio crackled once through the doorframe, and a voice said something too low to catch. We all looked toward the sound. That crackle was a reminder that decisions had schedules and deadlines not set by any of us. I felt the chest tightening that comes when a plan edges toward action. I moved into the corridor and stood where the penthouse hallway narrowed, where the light from the stairwell slanted across the marble. Rafael came out behind me and stopped a few feet away. His presence filled the space in the way only he can. Controlled, a measured pressure that makes other people's breathing change. Rafael, I said, and I made my voice a plain directive. Choose exposure or choose silence, and accept that I've been paying for your quiet. Tell me now which it is. He met my gaze for the first long time of the night. If I expose Luca, I expose my own decisions, he said. If I expose Luca, I expose everything I've done to keep the family together. If I expose Luca, I give you a chance to step away from the danger. If I keep quiet, I keep us safer in one sense, but I keep you bound to me in another. His jaw worked. The choice showed in the way his shoulders moved. We argued for minutes that sounded like hours. Conversations passed in quick exchanges, 3 lines, 5 lines, where the rhythm sped up and slowed. Marta insisting a witness wrote, Alvarez adding legal constraints, me demanding concrete numbers and names, Rafael giving small, measured admissions about past mercies. At one point the argument became a rapid back and forth between Rafael and Alvarez. If you hand us ledger entries and names, we can move, Alvarez. That's what we need now. I will not hand over everything that endangers people who are already cooperating, Rafael replied. Then we have nothing but a delay, Alvarez. Delay keeps people alive, Rafael answered. Delay gives Luca time to act, Alvarez. That exchange, 5 quick lines, felt like the crack of gunfire in my chest. Words were weapons, sentences rearranged possibility. I stepped between them and touched Rafel's sleeve. My fingers found glove leather folded under his coat pocket. Rafel, I said, and the word was careful. You reckon with your choices now, for her, for me, for Marta, for Detective Alvarez. Not for your control, not to tidy things later. He closed his eyes for a second, then slid his hand into his coat and brought out a thin envelope. It was the size of a passport. He held it out with both hands as if it were a fragile thing. Marta leaned forward as if to inspect. Detective Alvarez's eyes narrowed. I took the envelope without thinking and felt the weight of whatever he had surrendered. Inside were photocopies, account totals, a ledger page circled in handwriting I recognized from earlier receipts and notes. There were names. There were dates and transfers traced to places I knew Rafel's family did not like to discuss. My suspicion shifted again into a stunned clarity that rearranged earlier doubts. The photograph in my hand from Chapter 2 no longer felt like betrayal alone. It was one sign in a ledger that mapped decisions to consequences. Alvarez's voice became urgent. This is enough to start a case, he said. If Rafel stands with us now, we can move to protect witnesses and flip operatives. It'll be messy and some people will get hurt, but it's a path. Rafel looked at me. The way his dark eyes held mine felt like negotiation stripped to bone. If I do this, I will lose the thing I have been for years. An order, a structure, men who follow. I will lose power. I may lose my cousin. I may lose a part of what I have fought to keep. I accept that. But I will not lose you to silence again. There was so much in that sentence. He admitted cost, and he admitted purpose. He did not say the words "I love you," because his language is not made of declarations, but the action that followed counted as one. Marta reached out and took the photocopies from me, scanning them. We will need the originals and corroboration, she said, and a plan for extraction, for her and for any witnesses named. We will need to move tonight. Her voice had the authority of someone who arranges the practical pieces of a risk. She Rafel's name once. Rafel, you will have to accept that your name will come under scrutiny. He nodded. I understand. The admission landed like a small stone. He looked tired. I will accept it. I will hand over what I can. I will make calls. I will step back where necessary. He looked at me again, and for the first time this night there was a quiet I could call agreement rather than control. Then the courier's earlier smear of red made the plan urgent. Alvarez Marta to call for backup, to notify witness protection. Marta moved like a person who has always had to make room safe for fragile things. She called a contact and gave an address. Time became a list of actions. Phone calls secured routes, extraction points. Each external event arrived as a new paragraph of movement. I watched Rafel make arrangements as if I were reading a ledger. He ordered drivers, he gave names, he told Marta who to trust among his men. He did not speak to me in the soft talk he uses when he is trying to comfort. He spoke as the head of a family who is dismantling parts of that family because the moral calculus finally favored honesty. Each decision cost him something. At dawn, after Marta and Alvarez had argued logistics and phones had buzzed with orders, I stood at the building's curb with my worn leather journal and the gold locket at my throat. I did not wait for Rafel's final move. He had handed over what he could. Detective Alvarez had taken it with a promise to act. Marta had given me a small, careful look that felt like permission to walk away. I left with the journal because it is the one thing of mine he had not decided for me. I left with the locket because it is the one piece of small comfort that reminds me who I am when I do not want to be anyone's refuge. The sun was a weak amber on the horizon. Rain rubbed the pavement smooth. I sat on a bench in a park that smelled of wet leaves and old pavement and began to write. I wrote the first honest page of grief. I wrote the names of things I had foregone because forgiveness felt less dangerous than naming my hurt. I wrote about the photograph and the glovebox key and the way Rafel's hands had tried to make his secrecy look like mercy. I wrote about my decision to leave. Each line was a small practical thing, a name, a date, a detail. Writing organized grief into evidence, and that steadied me. Marta found me there just before the city woke. She sat next to me without asking and placed a small envelope in my lap. Inside was a pair of folded gloves, Rafel's leather driving gloves, and a short note. He left them for you. Marta, he asked to make sure you had them. He asked to tell you he turned over names this morning. He will be gone for a while. He you to keep the locket. If you need anything, call. I held the gloves. They smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar, the same scent I had traced to Rafel's coat. My fingers closed around the leather. I felt a new shift in my chest, from anger to something quieter, like a small, steady relief braided with loss. Rafel had chosen exposure and given up continuity. He had not asked for my forgiveness this time. He had made a choice that might keep other people alive and might cost him everything. I asked Marta a question that had been sitting under my ribs all night. Will he be safe? She met my eyes in a way that did not promise false comfort. He did what he had to do, she said. Now the police will handle the rest. He will be safer than before, in some ways, and less safe in others. He knows the risk. He accepted it. I closed my journal and tucked the gloves inside the back cover. That felt like an action that held both memory and decision. A physical way to keep his choice with me but not let it define my next steps. I stood up, buttoned my coat against the damp, and walked away from the bench with the locket resting against my collarbone. A few blocks down, a black sedan idled at a corner. Marta's driver watched the street. Detective Alvarez had gone to file the initial report. Rafael was not there. He had made his choice to step back and hand evidence over. Where he went next was not a mystery I needed to solve. What needed to be real was my choice. I had left the penthouse because I refused to be a quiet refuge again. At the end of that morning, I did one more concrete thing. I opened the locket, smoothed the thin chain, and removed the small photograph I had kept from before. I did not fold it away. I placed it on the first page of my journal and closed the cover. Then I took Rafael's gloves from the back and slipped them into my bag. The sound that closed the chapter was not a speech or an oath. It was the click of a glove folded into leather against paper. That was the concrete finality. An object moved from one place to another, a decision set into action. The city pulsed on around me, indifferent but awake. I had asked for truth and been given a cost. I had refused to make forgiveness a place to hide from pain. I had left, and in leaving I had made room for something like repair, not tidy, not promised, but honest. I put the journal under my arm, and walked into a morning that smelled of rain and possibilities I would now have to meet on my own terms.